December 20th, 1996. Christmas is just around the corner in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, a city of 50,000, 2 hours west of Philly.
Harrisburg is very interesting in that it is the capital city of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, so there are a lot of opportunities here, lots of jobs and state government. But then when you look within certain parts of the city, you do see where there are impoverished people.
And in 1996, there are few places in Harrisburg more impoverished than the Allison Hill neighborhood.
It's a community that has suffered, and they've been trying to revitalize it for many years, but unfortunately, a lot of criminal activity still happens there.
There's a lot of drug abuse. There's a lot of panhandling, poverty. Socioeconomic status is pretty low.
There's a lot of homicides in Allison Hill. You go there and neighbors are worried about their neighborhood.
And for one Allison Hill resident, this afternoon brings a new worry. It's a little after noon when Iris Belcher's brother notices smoke coming from the home across the street where his sister Iris lives.
He was really concerned about his sister.
Rushing over, he's met outside by Iris's boyfriend, Tyshant Love.
Where's Iris? She's upstairs.
As soon as that happened, he told the brother that something was wrong with Iris. And he took the brother into the house.
She's upstairs. It's bad.
Come on.
He said he came home and found something burning on the stove.
There was blood downstairs in the kitchen, and there was blood spatter going upstairs.
And when he followed the blood upstairs, he found Iris.
She was on the floor, laid down.
She was shot twice in her face.
At first glance, 20-year-old Iris Bennell Belcher appeared to have a bright future ahead of her.
She was a beautiful young woman, very intelligent young woman.
Iris had a really bubbly personality. She was just immediately likable. Everyone that came into contact with her really liked her. And she seemed to have so much potential.
But she'd also faced plenty of obstacles in her short life.
The environment she grew up in was extremely difficult.
It's difficult when there's a lot of drug trade to persevere through all of the outside influences that may bring you down.
And an unexpected pregnancy at age 15 didn't help.
Having a child at an early age is quite stressful.
That's a lot of balls to juggle.
If you don't have any help or any support, that alone can be extremely stressful or anxiety-provoking. How can you take care of yourself and take care of a child?
With few options to support herself, after Iris moved out on her own, she turned to drug dealing.
How Iris grew up explains a lot of why she entered the drug business.
Sometimes when people grow up in crime areas, it is ingrained in them.
It's just a twisted system. If you're coming up in that system and you're trying to say, I want to better myself, how do you get money?
Unfortunately, we don't live in a society where everyone has an equal opportunity to make a great life for themselves. And sometimes people do feel that the only option they have is to deal drugs or engage in some other illegal activity.
That's what she knew, and she was comfortable around it.
She was also good at it.
She was extremely intelligent, so it was easy for her to pick it up and make money doing it and support herself and her daughter.
She became really well known within the drug community and successful.
And she soon fell in with a group of dealers based out of New York City.
We had a lot of individuals coming down from New York City and selling drugs here because it was so lucrative. The drugs could be sold for so much more money, and they kept their contacts in New York, and then they would come down here and sell the drugs for more money and make a profit.
One of those New York drug dealers was Tyshant Love.
He was known as the professor. He had a studious air about him.
I never understood the relationship. It was one of those relationships where you look and you go, I don't get it. But she was in that drug life. He was in that drug life. They had lots in common.
But what really brought them together was the way Tyshant treated Iris's daughter.
Hey, babe. Oh no, she sleep already?
Yeah, I just got her down.
I got this for her though.
As a single mother, when the person that is now in the picture and is accepting of the child that you had before them, it does bring a sense of hope and a sense of family.
Will you stay the night, right?
I mean, yeah, I can just give it to her tomorrow.
Okay, sounds good.
That's where the connection became strong.
Ooh, I love the way that sounds.
The thought of becoming a family also sparked a change in Iris.
She wanted to better her life.
She was trying to get out of the drug trade and do something better for her family. One of the ways you do that is by education.
She had been accepted into the nursing program at Harrisburg Area Community College.
She really set her sights on a new life.
But now it appears that Iris's new life has come to a sudden, violent end.
After seeing smoke coming from her house, Iris's brother goes across the street to investigate.
He approached the property and he saw Tyshant come out. He was very panicked.
Yo, where's Iris? She's upstairs. Dad.
He took the brother into the house. They found Iris.
She was found in the bedroom with gunshot wounds.
Tyshant told her brother, "You call 911.
Call 911. Call 911.
And then he left the scene.
Iris, wake up, Iris. Where you going?
To make ends meet, single mother Iris Fennell Belcher was turning her life around.
She wanted more for her life and for her daughter. She decided she wanted out of the game, and she applied and got accepted to nursing school.
But now it's Iris who's in desperate need of medical attention.
Her boyfriend Tyshant and her brother have just found Iris on her bedroom floor.
She was found in the bedroom with gunshot wounds.
And then, after telling Iris's brother to call 911, Tyshant had run out the door.
I'll be back. I'll be right back. I'll be right back.
Tyshant said something along the lines of, "I know what happened, and I'm going to go take care of it."
Within minutes, sirens converge on the neighborhood.
It's chaotic. There's a lot of police that show up.
They enter the house with guns drawn.
Hurry! She's right here!
The first thing the officer has to do in a situation like this is actually clear the house.
But all they find is Iris's body on the bedroom floor.
She had two very close contact wounds, one going to the front of her mouth and one that went through her cheeks.
And given her past, the victim is well known to the police.
DOA on the scene, 20-year-old female, Iris Belcher, sent major crimes to the location.
I knew her, and I actually kind of liked her.
In this profession, you learn to hate the crime and not the person.
The detectives work quickly to try and determine what happened.
When we do an investigation for a homicide, we start at the body.
And the way she was killed, 2 close-range shots to the face, it seems significant.
That gives a very personal feeling to it, perhaps indicating that the killer was someone that she knew.
Although, given the world she moved in, that doesn't rule out a drug-related murder.
Maybe it was a rival dealer or an associate that double-crossed her.
You don't see too many random killings. It's usually drug deal gone bad or, some kind of criminal activity. Tensions can certainly flare up as a result of that.
However, there are also signs that suggest a different motive.
Her legs were spread and her genitalia was exposed.
The concern was that there was a sexual assault that took place.
There were signs of a struggle. There was some furniture knocked over.
Let's check downstairs.
While the killer's motive is unclear, it's easy to see how the deadly attack progressed.
Whatever was going on started in the kitchen.
There was burnt food, which means that an attack possibly happened in the middle of getting ready for a meal.
Then, based on the blood trail, it appears Iris's attacker dragged her upstairs.
The detectives find a clump of hair on the stairs.
They thought perhaps there was an altercation that happened on the stairs.
And perhaps most tragic of all, there's a Christmas tree in the living room with gifts underneath.
I'm sure she wanted to spend Christmas with her family, and to have her life tragically cut short 5 days before Christmas was gut-wrenching.
Just as gut-wrenching as the task of telling Iris's brother that his sister is dead.
He is devastated by this loss.
And like the police, he suspects that her death could be drug-related.
I kept telling her she's going to get herself killed.
Iris's family really pleaded with her to leave the drug dealing. They were concerned for her safety.
And the message had finally gotten through.
Iris was trying to better her life by enrolling in nursing school.
I really thought she was going to make it out.
Whenever you have somebody who's a drug dealer and they decide to get out, you root for them. It's like the underdog, and you want them to succeed.
Instead, it looked as if Iris's turnaround had been too little, too late.
So you came over and found her?
No, it was Tyshawn, her boyfriend.
Speaking with Iris's brother, the police learned that Tyshawn was at the scene, but he left shortly thereafter.
Did he say why?
He just said he wanted to get whoever did this.
So he knew who it was?
That's what he said.
The family knew she and Tyshawn were both involved in drugs, and that possibly this could have something to do with that.
However, it's not the only possibility they have to consider.
A lot of acts of violence originate from some sort of domestic altercation between romantic partners.
And since Tyshawn was allegedly the person that found her, the detectives are going to have to rule him out.
The detectives make finding Tyshawn their first priority.
Dispatch. I need a bolo on Tyshawn Love.
They issued a bolo, and he was found pretty quickly.
Tyshawn Love was brought to the police department to be interviewed.
When questioned by the detectives, Tyshawn says that Iris had been home alone the night before her murder.
Where were you?
I went out.
Tyshawn tells detectives that he went to a bar.
And Iris's daughter was spending the night at her mother's house.
She had been spending a lot of time with her mom because of Iris's lifestyle.
Her mom? She didn't really like what we've been doing. Selling drugs.
After the bar, Tyshawn said he'd gone to a friend's place.
He said he crashed there for a few hours.
You went back to the house?
Mm-hmm.
He said that he returned home and found her body.
And he says that as soon as he saw Iris dead on the floor, he knew who did it.
Who? Lamar. Lamar Peterson. Yeah, that's him.
I knew Lamar Peterson.
He loomed large in the drug community.
And it's not hard for the detective to believe that he's their killer.
He has a very troubled past, a lot of sexual assault.
There are some people in this world that just, I can't say anything else, they perpetrate evil.
Love has just told detectives investigating the murder of his girlfriend, Iris Fennell Belcher, that he knows who did it.
Lamar.
He said it was a fellow drug dealer named Lamar Peterson.
Lamar and Tyshawn were associates from the group of New York drug dealers, but I also knew that he was very violent.
And Lamar's reputation seems like a match to Iris's murderer.
Lamar Peterson was a violent sexual offender and was a suspect in a very violent sexual assault, attempted homicide in Harrisburg.
According to Tyshawn, he'd also been staying with them.
You knew y'all been looking for him on that rape thing, and he wanted to stay with us for a little while until things cooled off.
Lamar was somebody that if you wanted to stay someplace, you really didn't reject him.
You don't argue with Lamar. When he says jump, you just ask how high.
He was an individual that I didn't want to confront unless I had the manpower around me to confront him.
But according to Tyshawn, Iris wasn't intimidated by Lamar.
Apparently, Iris was really upset with Lamar staying there.
She just did not feel comfortable with him there, especially with their daughter.
And she did not bite her tongue in making it known her disdain towards him because of some acts he had allegedly committed.
There had been arguments between Tyshawn and Iris about Lamar.
And Tyshawn says that when he hesitated to kick Lamar out, Iris took matters into her own hands.
She confronted him. They had an altercation and she was really upset. She told me he had to leave.
She ever threatened him? Yeah.
She said if he didn't go, she'd tell the police where he was. Basically turning him in for rape, which gave him no other choice but to leave.
So, according to Tyshawn, Lamar had packed his things and left. But had he come back?
Tyshawn says if someone hurt Iris, it was definitely Lamar.
People didn't tell him no. There was a definite amount of respect for him.
And killing Iris may have been a way for him to save face.
And the crime appears to have Lamar's M.O. written all over it.
She had no clothing from her waist down.
And Lamar had a history of sexual assaults.
They think that possibly Iris could be one of Lamar's victims.
But while the police consider Lamar a possible suspect, they aren't ready to let Tyshawn off the hook just yet.
And how are things between you and Iris lately?
Honestly, not so great.
Tyshawn tells detectives they have the same argument a lot. Iris wants better for herself and she wants out of the game. But he likes things the way they are and doesn't want to change.
When you have conflicting views and conflicting desires or purposes in life, it does bring tension to the relationship.
And Tyshawn admits that last night, things got so tense, he had to get out of the house.
According to Tyshawn, that's why he'd gone to the bar.
He went just to get away from the situation.
But he says that Iris showed up at the same spot just a few hours later.
Tyshawn became enraged. This was opposite of everything that she said. She said she wanted to stay home, but here she was at a bar. They really got into a fight. He stormed off, but when he looked back, Iris was gone.
After that, Tyshawn says he stayed at the bar to drown his sorrows.
There was a woman there, Vanessa Ortiz. They were talking, they hit it off, and she eventually invited him back to her place.
And that's where you spent the night?
Yeah, but ain't nothing happened.
Tyshawn says they just stayed on the couch and watched a movie. But he woke up the next morning and he felt incredibly guilty.
And at a little before noon, he'd headed home.
He went to go smooth things over with Iris. But when he walked into the bedroom, he saw this heinous crime.
And you had nothing to do with this?
No, sir.
He said that he loved Iris and he would never do that to her.
And when police tracked down Vanessa Ortiz, it seems Tyshawn is telling the truth.
We found out that she was with Tyshawn Love that night. Tyshawn and Vanessa had met in a bar, and she said they then went back to her house to spend the night.
While the detectives spend the next 48 hours searching for Lamar, the news of Iris's murder spreads across the city.
In the mid-90s, there was no social media presence, really. There weren't cell phones like there are today, so people would get their paper in the morning and they would watch the nightly news to see what happened.
And the details about Iris's death struck a chord with people.
There are homicides that occur in the city where not even the news picks up on them. But Iris was not that kind of homicide. It was one of those that affected a lot of people.
So there's a lot of pressure to solve this murder.
And once the detectives track down Lamar, it looks like they're on the right track.
They bring Lamar in and they realize something very interesting.
We saw that there was blood on his boots.
Detectives investigating Iris Belcher's murder have brought notorious drug dealer Lamar Peterson in for questioning.
Iris's boyfriend Tyshawn had previously told detectives that he believes Lamar killed Iris.
Lamar Peterson.
Yeah, that's him.
And as soon as the detectives sit down with Lamar, they suspect Tyshawn may be right.
On his shoes, there's a splatter of blood. Also, he has a history of sexual assault, and Iris was found in a compromised manner that looks like it could be sexual assault.
You start to put two and two together and say, okay, is this going to come out to 4?
When the detectives ask Lamar about Iris's murder, he denies any involvement.
Lamar says despite his troubled past, it was not him, and he had nothing to do with her murder.
She didn't threaten to turn you in?
Man, she always saying stuff like that.
Detectives try to press him further, but Lamar remains silent.
He refuses to give them any more information.
But they may not need him to.
We noticed blood on your boot.
Any idea how that got there?
Lamar wouldn't talk, but because we saw that there was blood on those boots, we were able to take the boots of Lamar and we sent him to the Pennsylvania Police Lab.
After collecting his boots, detectives take Lamar into custody, but not for murder.
They hold him on the sexual assault charge that Iris supposedly threatened to turn him in on.
But detectives are still waiting for the DNA results when they get Iris's autopsy report.
The autopsy determined that she had been shot twice at extremely close range.
The first one was through the cheeks. That probably wouldn't have killed her.
Defensive wounds were indicated on her body.
She was fighting back.
And then she was killed with the one through the mouth.
However, there is one surprise in the report.
They determined there was no sexual assault.
So it's very puzzling.
Still, when the detectives get the DNA results on Lamar's boots back from the lab, they appear to be more than enough to seal his fate.
The blood that was on that boots was Iris's.
But before they charge Lamar with murder, the detectives get an unexpected tip about Vanessa Ortiz, the young woman who was Tyshawn's alibi.
According to a tipster, Vanessa had been bragging to her friends about seeing the murder take place. And Tyshawn had her hidden in a hotel so the police could not further question her.
The detectives rush to the hotel and bring Vanessa in for questioning.
She says she did spend the night with Tyshawn.
But she also tells detectives that his alibi is fake.
She said Tyshawn Love is the murderer.
Okay, so how do you know that?
Because I was there.
Vanessa tells detectives that on the morning after Tyshawn spent the night, she accompanied him back to his place.
They saw Iris cooking breakfast, and Iris was really upset that there was another woman in her home.
Who is she?
None of your business.
She and Tyshawn got into an altercation, and it became physical quickly.
What do you mean none of my business? This is my house.
No, this is my house.
This is our house.
No, it's not. I pay bills here. I'm the man here.
At some point during this argument, he pulled a gun out from under the stove.
Where I'm going now, huh?
Okay, so you saw him shoot her?
No.
Vanessa claims that Tyshawn pistol whipped her.
He grabbed her by her hair, dragged her upstairs.
And then Vanessa heard gunshots coming from upstairs.
She knew that Tyshawn had shot Iris twice.
So you didn't actually see him do it?
No.
Then, according to Vanessa, Tyshawn came back downstairs and they left.
If anybody asks, I was with you last night and today. Got it?
Come on.
He was desperate. He needed an alibi because he knew everything was going to point towards him, and he used her. That was just an act of desperation because a young girl like that is the last person he should have used as an alibi.
Then, after stashing Vanessa at a hotel, detectives suspect he went back home to stage the scene to further distance himself from the crime.
He went back and took off Iris's pants.
And then he pointed the finger at Lamar.
Do you have any idea who would do this?
Lamar.
Tyshawn was trying to ride the Lamar Peterson wave of violence, saying that Iris was just another one of his victims.
But there was a weak link in his plan. Vanessa.
This was overwhelming to her. There was no way she was going to hold that secret forever. There was no way she could do it.
And her story matches the physical evidence at the scene.
Vanessa's eyewitness account is enough for the detectives to take Tyshawn into custody.
We were able to get an arrest warrant.
But he continues to stick to his story.
His account was Lamar Peterson did this.
Which means there's a lot riding on Vanessa.
The government was heavily relying on her statements in order to convict Mr. Love.
And as the case moved towards trial, the prosecutors suddenly had a big problem.
Vanessa would not cooperate anymore.
As prosecutors prepare to put Iris Belcher's boyfriend, Tyshawn Love, on trial for murder, the case collapses when their star witness, Vanessa Ortiz, suddenly stops cooperating.
She got subpoenaed to the courtroom multiple times, and she was not showing up.
She had seen what happened to Iris, and she was terrified that was going to happen to her, and she didn't want to talk.
And without her testimony, the prosecution has no case.
When it went to the prelim, the charges were dropped because Vanessa wouldn't testify.
He becomes free again until such time that the government decides to refile the charges.
This news hits Iris's mother particularly hard.
She believed that it was Tyshawn who murdered her daughter, and it had to be gut-wrenching for her. It is just the worst thing ever. I mean, it's just, I can only imagine what she was going through.
When families are not able to have justice, it leaves them in a lot of emotional distress.
But even though they've dropped the charges, Tyshawn is never entirely off the detectives' radar.
When it comes to the crime of murder, there is no statute of limitations in Pennsylvania, and so those charges can always be refiled at a date in the future.
Over time, is it that easy? No, it's not that easy.
It was assigned to other detectives. They weren't able to make headway.
But you still don't ever give up, especially if you believe that this case can eventually lead to something.
Eventually, the case ends up on the desk of Detective Donald Hefner.
I was working several homicides at the time. A couple of them were cold cases, but I felt that this was a case that could be solved. And I decided to put my efforts into it.
Sometimes you need another set of eyes to look at something from another point of view.
Even if that means starting over from the beginning.
I spoke to everybody I could. I mean, in these kind of cases, that's what you do. You kind of flip over every rock you can find to see what's underneath. And a lot of it is nothing, but sometimes it's something.
After some digging, Detective Hefner develops a sense of just how tumultuous Iris and Tyshawn's relationship had been.
Their relationship was pretty toxic.
He was painted as jealous.
Friends also said he was abusive.
On the outside, it looked like Iris and Tyshawn had a great relationship. On the inside, it wasn't so great. There was a lot of arguing, a lot of fighting, which led to sometimes physical altercations.
As time goes on, the brutality increases.
Until Iris had reached her limit.
I learned that she had told friends that she wanted to leave him.
And since she was his connection into Harrisburg's drug world, Tyshawn couldn't have that.
Iris brought him up in the social ladder, and without her, he was nothing.
But that's not enough to file new charges. There's still one loose end that needs tying up. Lamar Peterson.
We knew there was a problem with the case because of the blood on his boots and because of his violent behavior.
And if Tyshawn even went to trial for the murder, defense was sure to use Lamar to raise reasonable doubt.
What we couldn't verify is when that blood got on the boots. We don't know if there was another fight. We don't know if he was there when the gunshot occurred. We just don't know.
And Lamar, by this time in prison for an unrelated crime, refused to say.
I tried to close that loop, but Lamar wouldn't talk to me.
Which once again means everything is riding on Vanessa Ortiz.
Vanessa was the key.
Will she talk now that some time has passed?
I said to myself that there's a possibility that she is mature enough to talk about this, because I'm sure this has not left her alone.
And since Vanessa has become a mother in the interim, there may be a way to reach her.
You know Iris had a daughter, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes the empathetic side kicks in, and it's just messed up. This little girl has no mom. And I have information that can find this little girl some closure.
She began opening up to me, and she started to relay details of what happened at that house.
She also changes her story.
She now says that she has seen Tyshawn shoot Iris.
To get Vanessa to finally open up was a big step in trying to solve this homicide.
In September of 2001, 5 years after Iris's murder, police arrest Tyshawn for a second time. But once again, as the trial date approaches, the prosecutors are faced with a problem.
Vanessa is nowhere to be found.
Only this time, they're prepared.
They recorded her testimony, and they could use it in court.
Shortly before Tyshawn Love is scheduled to finally stand trial for the murder of Iris Fennell Belcher, the prosecution's star witness disappears a second time.
When Vanessa refused to cooperate, the first time that Tyshawn was supposed to stand trial, the prosecutors had been forced to drop the charges.
Without her testimony, there was no way to bound the case over to trial. So the case had to be dismissed.
But this time, the detectives and prosecutors are ready.
They have recorded her sworn statement.
And since it was all under oath, the prosecutors are able to use it in court when Tyshawn finally stands trial in September of 2005.
Homicide happened in 1996, so it took 9 years for prosecutors to feel like they had enough evidence to take it to trial.
In their open, the prosecutors portray Tyshawn as a vengeful boyfriend who refused to accept the end of a relationship.
Iris was getting ready to leave him. She was enrolled in school, she was trying to turn over a new leaf, and she was trying to leave the drug life behind.
She was also trying to leave her abusive boyfriend behind.
When people who have experienced domestic violence are trying to get out, those are the most dangerous times.
And when Tyshawn brought Vanessa to the home on the morning of the murder and an argument ensued, Tyshawn's anger boiled over into rage.
The gunshot wounds to the mouth, to me, indicated, shut your mouth.
But there was no way for Tyshant to shut Vanessa up.
Her recorded testimony was the key to the prosecution's case.
They had fun the night before. You come home with the person and you witness a murder. I can't imagine that depth of trauma that could have been for her.
Still, as powerful as Vanessa's recorded statement is, the defense also has some cards to play.
There's always going to be that thought that Lamar Peterson played a part in this homicide.
The fact that there were traces of Ms. Belcher's blood on Mr. Peterson's shoe signals to the jury, hey, there could be someone else who committed this crime.
And the prosecution never came up with a compelling explanation for how Iris's blood ended up on Lamar's boot.
I honestly think that Lamar Peterson was a witness to the violence. And because he was such a violent man, he just didn't care. So he saw what happened, and he was fine with it.
But will questions about Lamar be enough for Tyshant's acquittal?
When a verdict is read, the jury finds him guilty of third-degree murder.
In Pennsylvania, first-degree murder requires an intentional killing. There has to be premeditation. A second-degree murder, there is an underlying felony. And then third-degree murder, it's pretty much a killing with malice.
The judge sentences Tyshant to 30 years in prison.
The system did punish Tyshant for his violence and for taking another life, and we got closure for the family. Unfortunately, when you have these kind of homicides, or when you have a homicide investigation, we don't have justice. We have closure. In order to have justice, I have to make you kind of whole again. I can't do that. I can't bring that person back.
However, Iris's memory lives on in her daughter, now an adult with a family of her own.
To live with every day knowing that your mother was taken from you before you even had a chance to get to know her, I can only imagine what impact that's had on her.
You can adapt to it. You can learn to live with it. You can't forget it.
Despite that, Iris's daughter has created a rich life for herself.
She also realized her mom's dream, and she became a nurse.
And in that way, Iris's legacy lives on.
I remember her family talking about her as somebody who had a lot of dreams and aspirations. She had planned to better her life for herself and her child.
In the early 1970s, in the neighborhood surrounding Houston and Pasadena, Texas, there was a man many people believed they understood. He was not someone who stood out in a crowd. He was not a person who appeared threatening or unusual. To many who knew him casually, Dean Arnold Corll was simply a quiet man living an ordinary life. He worked, he interacted with people around him, and he maintained an image that gave no obvious warning of the darkness hidden behind it. In his community, he was known by a nickname that seemed almost harmless, the Candy Man. The name came from his connection to a small candy business, something that made him familiar to many young people in the neighborhood. It created an image of someone approachable, someone who seemed safe. But behind that ordinary appearance was a secret that would eventually shock the entire state of Texas and leave a permanent mark on the history of American crime. Between 1970 and 1973, Dean Corll became connected to one of the most horrifying series of crimes in 20th century America. Investigators would later determine that he had been responsible for the deaths of numerous teenage boys, with at least 29 victims linked to him. The exact number remains uncertain, leaving behind unanswered questions that continue to trouble investigators and families who lost loved ones. For years, the disappearances happened quietly. Teenagers vanished from their neighborhoods. Families waited for sons who never returned home. Friends searched for explanations. In many cases, there was no immediate connection between one missing teenager and another. The disappearances appeared separate, isolated, and without a clear pattern. But behind those missing person cases was a terrifying reality. A man who appeared ordinary had been operating within the same communities where these young victims lived. A person who seemed familiar had become the center of a hidden nightmare. The story of Dean Corll is not only the story of a criminal. It is also the story of the young people whose lives were taken away, the families left searching for answers, and a community forced to confront the possibility that danger could exist behind a familiar face. The tragedy began with trust. Many of the victims were teenagers from the Houston area. They were young people growing up in neighborhoods where friendships formed naturally, where people often knew their neighbors, and where a familiar adult figure could easily appear dependable. Corll used that sense of familiarity to his advantage. According to investigators, he did not operate alone. Two teenagers, David Owen Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley, were later identified as individuals who helped him gain access to victims. Their involvement became a critical part of understanding how the crimes continued for so long. The fact that teenagers were connected to the crimes made the case even more disturbing. It revealed a complicated and painful reality. The person responsible had been able to use relationships and trust to reach those who would eventually become victims. During the years when the disappearances occurred, many families were living with uncertainty. A son leaving home and not returning was not simply a moment of fear. It became a long period of unanswered questions. Where had he gone? Had he left willingly? Would he come back? For some families, hope remained for years. The possibility that their loved one might return was something they had to carry every day. But as the investigation later revealed the truth, that hope was replaced by unimaginable grief. The case became one of the darkest chapters in Texas criminal history because of the contrast between appearance and reality. Dean Corll did not fit the image many people expected when they thought about a dangerous criminal. He was someone who blended into his surroundings. He was someone who could exist among ordinary people without immediately attracting suspicion. That contrast became one of the most disturbing elements of the investigation. It forced the community to question how someone could commit such crimes while maintaining the appearance of a normal life. The name Candyman carried a disturbing irony after the truth emerged. What had once suggested friendliness and familiarity became connected to one of the most devastating criminal cases Texas had ever experienced. As investigators later reconstructed the events, they discovered that the crimes were connected to specific locations, including a rented house in Houston and a boat storage building. These places, which appeared ordinary from the outside, became central to understanding what had happened. The discovery of the truth did not happen immediately. For a long period, the disappearances remained scattered pieces of a puzzle. Each missing teenager represented an individual tragedy, but authorities had not yet uncovered the connection between them. The investigation would eventually reveal that these were not separate incidents. They were parts of a larger pattern. The turning point came in August 1973, when the relationship between Dean Corll and Elmer Wayne Henley reached a breaking point. The events of that night would bring the hidden crimes into public view and begin a chain of discoveries that would transform the case from a series of unanswered disappearances into one of the most shocking investigations in Texas history. When Henley contacted police and led them to locations connected to the crimes, authorities began uncovering the scale of what had happened. What they found changed everything. The investigation expanded rapidly. Locations connected to Corll became the focus of searches. Evidence revealed that multiple victims had been connected to the same pattern of crimes. The community that had once seen Corll as an ordinary person was forced to confront a horrifying truth. A serial killer had been living among them. The impact was immediate. Families who had spent years waiting for answers were faced with devastating revelations. Investigators who had been searching for missing teenagers now understood the true scope of the case. The people of Houston and surrounding areas were forced to look back at years of disappearances and recognize that many of them had been connected all along. The Houston mass murders became more than a criminal investigation. It became a reminder of the vulnerability of young people and the importance of recognizing when someone disappears without explanation. The victims were not simply names in an investigation file. They were sons, friends, and members of families who expected them to come home. Their stories became permanently connected to one of the most infamous criminal cases in American history. Although Dean Corll died before he could face trial, preventing a courtroom examination of his actions, the investigation continued through the prosecution of those connected to him. The questions surrounding the case, however, did not disappear. How many victims were there? Were there other missing teenagers whose disappearances were never connected? Could more answers have been found if the pattern had been discovered earlier? These questions remain part of the lasting legacy of the case. The story of Dean Corll is ultimately a story about the danger of appearances, the pain of families searching for answers, and the lives of young people whose futures were taken from them. Behind every investigation statistic were real individuals. Behind every discovery were families forced to face unimaginable loss. The Houston mass murders remain one of the darkest reminders in American criminal history that evil does not always announce itself. Sometimes it hides behind familiarity. Sometimes it exists in places people believe are safe. And sometimes the person nobody suspects becomes the person everyone remembers. Before the name Dean Corll became associated with one of the darkest criminal cases in Texas history, the victims were simply young people living ordinary lives. They were teenagers growing up in Houston and the surrounding areas, experiencing the everyday moments that define adolescence. They had friends, families, routines, and dreams that extended far beyond the neighborhoods where they lived. Their lives were not defined by the tragedy that later surrounded their names. They were individuals with their own personalities, their own relationships, and their own futures that were taken away. The Houston area during the early 1970s was a place where neighborhoods were closely connected. Many people knew one another. Young people spent time outside, visited friends, and built friendships through school, local activities, and the communities where they lived. In that environment, familiarity often created trust. A person who was known in the neighborhood could easily become someone others felt comfortable around. Adults who appeared friendly were often accepted without suspicion. For many families, the idea that someone they recognized could represent danger was almost impossible to imagine. This was the environment in which Dean Corll operated. To many people around him, Corll did not appear to be someone who would cause harm. He maintained a quiet presence and avoided drawing attention to himself. His connection to a candy business contributed to the image many people had of him. The nickname Candy Man suggested someone approachable, someone associated with something ordinary and familiar. But beneath that appearance was a reality that would eventually be uncovered through investigation. The victims connected to the case were primarily teenage boys. Many of them were from the same general communities where Corll lived and worked. Some knew him directly, while others were connected through friendships and social circles. This connection through familiarity became a central part of understanding how the crimes were able to continue. The disappearances did not immediately reveal a larger pattern. When one teenager failed to return home, families naturally searched for individual explanations. They looked for reasons that might explain why someone had disappeared. They hoped for a return. They hoped for a phone call. They hoped for news that would bring relief. But as more teenagers vanished, the uncertainty grew. Each missing person represented a family experiencing fear and confusion. Parents and relatives were left without clear answers. Friends were left wondering what had happened to someone they knew. The absence of information created a painful situation where questions remained unanswered for long periods. At the time, the connection between these missing teenagers and Dean Corll was not immediately recognized. The idea that the disappearances were linked to one person was hidden beneath the surface. There was no obvious warning sign that immediately revealed the existence of a larger crime. The pattern remained undiscovered while families continued searching for their missing loved ones. That lack of connection became one of the most tragic aspects of the case. The victims were not strangers who disappeared from distant places. They were young people from communities where neighbors knew one another. Their disappearances represented a loss felt within ordinary households. The later investigation would show that Dean Corll was able to take advantage of relationships around him. He was not an outsider who appeared suddenly. He was someone who had become familiar to people in the area. The involvement of David Owen Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley added another disturbing dimension to the case. Investigators determined that Corll had received assistance from the two teenagers, who helped him approach and gain access to victims. The presence of young accomplices complicated the understanding of the crimes. It showed how manipulation and influence could play a role in allowing such a pattern of violence to continue. For investigators trying to understand what happened, The question was not only how many victims there were, but also how the crimes had remained hidden for so long. The answer was connected to several factors: the trust created by familiarity, the isolated nature of individual disappearances, and the difficulty of recognizing a pattern when each case initially appeared separate. The victims' families experienced the investigation from a place of deep uncertainty. For years, some families had no explanation for what happened. The absence of answers created a different kind of suffering. A confirmed tragedy, while devastating, provides certainty. But uncertainty leaves families trapped between hope and fear. The discovery of the truth eventually brought answers, but those answers carried an unbearable weight. When investigators uncovered the scale of the crimes connected to Coral, the community had to confront the reality that many missing teenagers had become part of a much larger tragedy. The case changed how people viewed the world around them. The neighborhoods where people had lived, worked, and raised families were suddenly connected to a shocking criminal investigation. Places that once seemed ordinary became associated with painful memories and unanswered questions. Among the most disturbing discoveries was the realization that the person responsible had not appeared dangerous to those around him. This became one of the lasting lessons of the case. The danger was not obvious. There was no public warning that revealed what was happening. Instead, the crimes existed quietly behind a familiar identity. The contrast between the person people believed they knew and the truth discovered later became one of the reasons the case remained so deeply disturbing. The victim stories also became a reminder that criminal investigations are not only about evidence, locations, and suspects. At the center of every case are human lives. The teenagers connected to the Houston mass murders were more than victims in an investigation. They were members of families who loved them and communities that remembered them. Their names became part of a case that shocked Texas, but their identities existed before the tragedy. They had families who cared about them, friendships that mattered, and lives that should have continued. The investigation into Dean Coral would later uncover at least 29 victims connected to him, although authorities could not determine with absolute certainty whether more victims existed. That uncertainty became another source of pain. For investigators, it represented unanswered questions. For families, it represented the possibility that some stories had never been fully revealed. The case demonstrated how difficult it can be to uncover the truth when crimes are hidden behind ordinary appearances. For a long time, Dean Coral remained someone many people considered familiar. The nickname Candyman represented a public image that concealed the reality of his actions. But the victims and their families carried the consequences of that hidden reality. As the investigation moved forward, authorities would begin connecting the missing teenagers, the locations involved, and the people surrounding Coral. The scattered pieces of information would slowly become one of the most shocking criminal investigations Texas had ever witnessed. The truth would reveal a disturbing pattern. The disappearances were not isolated events. They were connected. And the discovery of that connection would forever change how the Houston community remembered the years when teenagers disappeared and no one yet understood why. For years, the disappearances connected to the Houston area remained separated by time, distance, and uncertainty. Families experienced their own individual tragedies, believing they were facing isolated situations. A teenager failed to return home. A family searched for answers. Friends waited for someone to explain what had happened. At first, there was no clear indication that these cases belonged to the same story. The reality hidden beneath those disappearances was far more disturbing. According to investigators, Dean Coral had created a pattern of crimes that continued from 1970 until 1973. During this period, he was able to maintain the appearance of an ordinary man while concealing the actions that would later make him one of the most infamous criminals in Texas history. The crimes took place within communities where people knew one another. The neighborhoods around Houston and Pasadena were not places where residents expected to encounter such a threat. They were places where familiarity often created a sense of security. That sense of security became one of the reasons the crimes remained hidden for so long. Dean Coral understood the importance of appearing trustworthy. The image people saw was not one of a dangerous individual. Instead, he was viewed as someone ordinary, someone connected to a local business, someone who seemed approachable. His nickname, Candyman, reflected that public perception. But behind that image was a man investigators later determined had been responsible for a series of murders involving teenage boys. The victims were often connected to Coral through the social environment around him. Many were young people from the same communities where he lived. Some knew him directly, while others became connected through friendships and acquaintances. This created a situation where the person who should have represented safety became connected to danger. The involvement of two teenagers, David Owen Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley, became one of the most important parts of understanding how Coral was able to reach his victims. Investigators determined that the two young men helped Coral approach and gain access to victims. Their involvement revealed another disturbing layer of the case. The crimes were not simply the actions of one person operating in complete isolation. Instead, there was a network of relationships that allowed the pattern to continue. The investigation later showed that Coral used those connections to bring victims into situations where they disappeared. During the years before the truth was discovered, the families of missing teenagers faced an emotional struggle that was difficult to describe. A disappearance creates a painful space between hope and fear. Without answers, families are left wondering whether their loved one might return. Every unanswered question becomes a reminder that something is wrong. For many families, the disappearance of a son was not immediately understood as part of a larger criminal pattern. There was no clear evidence that connected one missing teenager to another. Each case existed separately. That separation allowed the hidden pattern to continue. As investigators later reconstructed the events, they discovered that locations connected to Coral played an important role in the crimes. A rented house in Houston and a boat storage building became central locations in understanding what had occurred. From the outside, these places appeared ordinary. They were not locations that immediately suggested anything unusual. Like Coral himself, they existed within everyday surroundings. But the investigation would later reveal their connection to the disappearance of numerous teenagers. The discovery of those locations transformed the case. What had once been a collection of missing person reports became a much larger investigation. Authorities began to understand that they were not searching for answers in separate cases. They were uncovering evidence of a series of crimes connected to one individual. The scale of the discovery shocked the community. People who had lived near Coral had to confront the reality that someone they considered familiar had been hiding a terrible secret. The case also raised difficult questions about trust. How could someone maintain an ordinary appearance while committing such crimes? How could disappearances continue without the connection being discovered sooner? How could a person become accepted within a community while hiding actions that would eventually destroy so many lives? These questions became central to the way the case was remembered. The turning point came in August 1973. By that time, the relationship between Dean Coral and Elmer Wayne Henley had reached a critical moment. The events that followed would bring the crimes into the open and lead investigators toward the truth. Henley contacted police and provided information that directed authorities toward locations connected to the murders. This moment changed everything. For years, investigators and families had been searching for answers without knowing the full picture. Suddenly, information began connecting the missing teenagers to one central figure. The investigation moved quickly. Authorities began examining locations associated with Coral. As evidence was uncovered, the reality of the situation became impossible to ignore. The discoveries revealed that the disappearances were connected, and that the number of victims was far greater than anyone had initially understood. The community reaction was one of shock and disbelief. The idea that a serial killer had existed within their neighborhoods was difficult for many people to comprehend. Coral had not been seen as a dangerous figure. He had been viewed as someone ordinary. That contrast became one of the most haunting aspects of the case. The investigation also exposed the suffering of the victims' families in a new way. Many families who had spent years searching for missing loved ones now faced the painful truth that they would never see them return. The answers they had wanted came with devastating consequences. As authorities continued their work, they discovered evidence connected to multiple victims at different locations, including areas near Houston, the Sam Rayburn Reservoir, and the Bolivar Peninsula. These discoveries expanded the investigation and demonstrated the full scope of the crimes. The Houston mass murders were no longer a mystery involving a few missing teenagers. They had become one of the largest murder investigations in Texas history. The case showed how a criminal pattern could remain hidden when individual events were viewed separately. It showed how appearances could influence perception, and it showed the devastating consequences when the warning signs of a larger pattern are not recognized. But even as investigators began uncovering the truth, one question remained at the center of the case. How many lives had truly been lost? Authorities eventually linked at least 29 victims to Dean Corll. However, because Corll died before facing trial, many details about the crimes would never be fully examined in court. The absence of a trial meant that some questions would remain unanswered. For the families of the victims, the investigation provided recognition of what had happened, but it could never restore what had been taken away. The lives of those teenagers had been interrupted forever. Their families carried the loss. Their community carried the memory. And the name Dean Corll became permanently connected to one of the darkest chapters in Texas criminal history. The incident was not simply the discovery of a crime. It was the collapse of an illusion. A man who appeared ordinary had hidden extraordinary cruelty. A neighborhood that felt familiar had become the setting for a tragedy. And a series of disappearances that once seemed unrelated were finally revealed as part of one horrifying story. When authorities first began looking deeper into the disappearances connected to Dean Corll, they were not investigating what would become one of the most shocking criminal cases in Texas history. At the beginning, there was no complete picture, no single investigation that connected every missing teenager, and no clear understanding that multiple families were suffering from the same hidden cause. The truth was buried beneath years of unanswered questions. The investigation developed slowly, piece by piece, as authorities began examining the information that surrounded the missing teenagers. Each disappearance represented a separate tragedy, but the deeper investigators looked, the more they began to recognize that something much larger was taking place. The discovery of the connection between the victims and Dean Corll changed the entire direction of the investigation. For years, Corll had maintained an image of normality. The same person who would later become associated with one of the most infamous crime cases in Texas had once been viewed as simply another member of the community. That made the investigation even more difficult. Investigators were not searching for an obvious threat. They were uncovering the actions of someone who had managed to hide behind familiarity. The nickname Candyman became a symbol of that contradiction. It represented the distance between how Corll was perceived by many people and what investigators eventually discovered. The investigation took its most important turn in August 1973. At that time, a confrontation occurred involving Dean Corll and Elmer Wayne Henley. The details surrounding that moment became the beginning of the end for Corll's hidden crimes. After the confrontation, Henley contacted law enforcement and provided information that directed authorities toward locations connected to the murders. This was the breakthrough investigators had been missing. For years, missing teenagers had left behind unanswered questions. Families had searched for explanations. Authorities had attempted to understand individual disappearances. Now, they had information that suggested these cases were connected. The investigation immediately expanded. Authorities began examining locations associated with Dean Corll, including a rented house in Houston and a boat storage building. These locations became central to understanding how the crimes had been carried out and how evidence had been hidden. What investigators discovered changed the case completely. The locations were connected to multiple victims, revealing that the disappearances were not isolated incidents. They were part of a larger pattern. The investigation moved from searching for missing individuals to uncovering the scale of a series of murders. As authorities continued their work, they discovered evidence connected to victims in several different locations. These included areas near the Sam Rayburn Reservoir, the Bolivar Peninsula, and locations in Houston. Each discovery added another piece to the investigation. The reality became increasingly difficult to comprehend. A community that had spent years searching for missing teenagers was now faced with the knowledge that many of those disappearances had been connected to the same person. The investigation also revealed the role of David Owen Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley. Their involvement became a major part of understanding the case. Investigators determined that the two teenagers had assisted Coral by helping him approach and gain access to victims. This discovery complicated the investigation because it demonstrated that Coral had not operated completely alone. The relationships between Coral and those around him became an important focus for investigators trying to understand how the crimes had continued. The investigation was not only about identifying victims and locations. It was also about understanding the circumstances that allowed the crimes to remain hidden. One of the most disturbing aspects of the case was the fact that Coral had been able to exist within the community without creating immediate suspicion. He was someone people recognized. He was someone who appeared familiar. He was someone who did not match the image many people had of a dangerous criminal. This contrast became one of the most important lessons from the investigation. The case showed that appearances could be misleading and that crimes could remain hidden when warning signs were overlooked or when individual events were not connected. As investigators uncovered the evidence, the emotional impact on families and the community grew stronger. Families who had spent years hoping for the return of missing loved ones now faced devastating answers. The investigation provided clarity, but that clarity came with tremendous pain. The truth revealed that many of the teenagers who had disappeared were victims of a much larger crime. For investigators, the discovery was both a breakthrough and a responsibility. They had to identify the victims, document the evidence, and reconstruct what had happened. Every discovery represented another family waiting for answers. The investigation also raised difficult questions that would continue long after the case was exposed. Were there other victims who had never been identified? Had other disappearances been connected to Coral but never discovered? Could more information have been uncovered if the pattern had been recognized earlier? These questions remained because Coral would never stand trial. Before investigators could fully examine every detail through a courtroom process, Dean Coral was dead. His death meant that many questions about his actions would never receive direct answers from him. The investigation, therefore, became the primary source of understanding what had happened. Authorities relied on the evidence they uncovered, the information provided by those involved, and the locations connected to the crimes. The Houston mass murders investigation became one of the most significant criminal investigations in Texas history because of its scale and the shocking contrast between the suspect's public image and the reality behind it. The case forced the community to confront a painful truth. A person who seemed ordinary had been responsible for extraordinary suffering. A series of disappearances that once appeared unrelated had been connected. And behind every piece of evidence was the story of a young person whose life had been taken away. The investigation eventually established that Dean Coral was connected to at least 29 victims. However, the possibility that additional victims existed remained one of the unanswered questions surrounding the case. The uncertainty added another layer of tragedy. For families who never received complete answers, the investigation could only provide part of the closure they wanted. The evidence revealed what had happened, but it could not undo the loss. The story of the investigation is therefore not only about police work and discoveries. It is also about the human cost behind every step. Each location searched represented another chapter in a tragedy. Each piece of evidence represented another life interrupted. Each name added to the investigation represented a family forever changed. The breakthrough in August 1973 ended Dean Coral's ability to hide his crimes. But for the families of the victims, the consequences would last much longer. The investigation uncovered the truth, but the truth itself became one of the most painful discoveries a community could face. The discovery of the truth behind the Houston mass murders created one of the most difficult legal situations authorities had ever faced. The investigation had revealed a devastating pattern of crimes, identified a central figure responsible for the murders, and uncovered the scale of the tragedy that had affected numerous families. But there was one major obstacle. Dean Arnold Coral would never stand inside a courtroom. The man at the center of the investigation would never face a judge, never hear the full list of accusations against him, and never provide answers to the many questions surrounding the crimes. Before a trial could take place, Coral was dead. His death meant that the traditional process of justice could not happen in the way many people expected. For the families of the victims, this created a complicated and painful reality. The investigation had revealed the truth about what happened to their loved ones, but there would never be a public trial where the evidence could be presented and examined before a court. There would be no moment when Coral would have to answer for his actions. There would be no opportunity for families to confront him through the legal system. Instead, they were left with the knowledge that the person responsible had escaped the possibility of a courtroom judgment. However, the investigation did not end with Coral's death. Authorities continued examining the evidence and the involvement of those connected to him. The roles of David Owen Brooks and Elmer Wayne Henley became central to the legal aftermath of the case. Unlike Coral, they survived and faced the consequences of their involvement. The investigation had revealed that they had helped Coral gain access to victims, making their actions an important part of the prosecution that followed. Their involvement created another difficult question surrounding the case. How could young people become connected to such crimes? The answer was part of the larger investigation into the relationships surrounding Coral. Authorities had to examine not only what happened, but also how the crimes had been carried out and how multiple individuals became connected to the events. The legal process focused on those who remained alive and could be held accountable. The case became a reminder that criminal investigations do not always end with a complete explanation. Sometimes, even after the truth is uncovered, important questions remain unanswered. For the victims' families, the absence of Coral from the courtroom represented a permanent loss of closure. A trial often serves multiple purposes. It allows evidence to be presented, allows victim stories to be heard, and allows the public to understand how justice is carried out. In the Houston mass murders case, that process was incomplete. The investigation revealed the crimes, but the courtroom would never reveal every detail that might have emerged through testimony and examination. The community therefore had to rely on the findings of investigators and the evidence discovered during the case. The outcome of the investigation confirmed what had happened. Dean Coral was responsible for a series of murders involving numerous teenage victims, and his actions had created one of the darkest criminal cases in Texas history. The number of victims connected to Coral was eventually determined to be at least 29. But even after that number was established, uncertainty remained. Investigators could not completely determine whether additional victims existed. Because Coral was no longer alive to answer questions, some parts of the case remained permanently unknown. This uncertainty became one of the most painful parts of the aftermath. For families who had lost loved ones, every unanswered question represented another piece of grief that could never fully be resolved. The legal consequences for Brooks and Henley became the remaining path toward accountability. Their involvement demonstrated that the crimes were not simply the actions of one person hidden from everyone around him. There were connections, relationships, and decisions that allowed Coral's crimes to continue. The prosecution of the surviving individuals became an important part of establishing responsibility. Their cases helped provide some recognition of what had happened and acknowledge the suffering experienced by the victims and their families. However, no legal outcome could change the reality of what had been lost. The teenagers connected to the case would never return. The families who had waited for answers had to learn how to live with those answers. The community that had once believed it was safe had to confront a disturbing truth about the person who had lived among them. The Houston mass murders case, therefore, became an example of the limits of justice. Investigators could uncover the truth. Courts could punish those who remained. But nothing could restore the lives that had been taken. The absence of a trial for Dean Coral also contributed to the lasting mystery surrounding the case. Without his testimony, many questions about his motivations, his full actions, and the possibility of additional victims remained unanswered. The investigation could establish facts through evidence, but it could not provide every explanation. That became part of the legacy of the case. Even decades later, the Houston mass murders remained a subject of discussion because it represented more than a criminal investigation. It represented a failure of trust, a loss of innocence, and a reminder of how difficult it can be to uncover hidden crimes. The case also changed the way many people viewed the danger of individuals who appear ordinary. Dean Coral had not been viewed by many around him as someone dangerous. His public image and his private actions existed in complete contradiction. That contradiction became one of the most disturbing elements of the story. The person who appeared familiar became the person responsible for unimaginable harm. The outcome of the case was therefore not a simple conclusion. There was no single courtroom moment that closed the story. There was no final statement from Coral. There was no complete explanation for every unanswered question. Instead, there was an investigation that exposed the truth, legal proceedings against those who remained, and a community left to remember the victims. The names of the victims became the most important part of the story. They represented the lives behind the investigation. They represented families who lost sons, friends who lost companions, and a community that was forever changed. The legal aftermath established responsibility, but the emotional aftermath continued. For those affected, the case did not end when the investigation ended. It continued through memories, unanswered questions, and the ongoing process of remembering those who were lost. The Houston mass murders remain one of the most disturbing chapters in American crime history because of both the scale of the tragedy and the unusual circumstances surrounding justice. The truth was uncovered. Those responsible were identified, but complete closure remained impossible. The case demonstrated that sometimes the end of an investigation does not mean the end of pain. For the families of the victims, the consequences lasted far beyond the courtroom that never happened. And for Texas, the name Dean Coral became permanently associated with one of the darkest reminders of how hidden crimes can exist behind an ordinary appearance.